What is up everybody, Roadrunner back with another tutorial. Today we're going to be doing Photoshop hotkeys, tips, and tricks. Let's get into it. So before I start this tutorial, I do want to emphasize that these are basic tips, tricks, and hotkeys for beginners with Photoshop. If you are an intermediate or advanced user of Photoshop, you probably won't get a lot out of this. I'm going to be going over most of the keyboard shortcuts that I use on a daily basis, and a lot of these keyboard shortcuts can be found here. If you've seen any of my videos in the past, you know that I am a huge fan of keyboard shortcuts. I think you can create a more efficient workflow just by using keyboard shortcuts. So with that being said, let's get into it. The first keyboard shortcut I'm going to show you is Cmd N for new document. Here it will show you all the recent document presets you've used in the past. You can also change the size over here, width and height. You can also change your units, whether it be pixels, inches, centimeters, etc. You can also save your preset by naming it and clicking here. The next one is Cmd O for open a new document. So I'm going to just click on a picture I took last year in Colorado, and boom, it will automatically open up that photo. Another tip that I have for you is when you open up a brand new Photoshop document, you may notice that it does come with a background layer. In order to make that into an editable layer, you can just double click on it and this window will come up, and I highly recommend you name your layers. I have the bad habit of not naming my layers until I'm going through an illustration or something like that, and I realized that I have no idea what any of the layers are, so I'm having to check the eye to figure out which layer it is and then label it that way. So I'm saying this not just for you, but for also a reminder to myself to name your layers as you go along. It will save you so much time in the long run. The next one is, in order to duplicate a layer, you can just hit Cmd J. And this one always throws me off because I'm used to using Cmd D to duplicate things, but it is Cmd J in Photoshop. And let's say you wanted to merge it with the layer below it, you would just hit Cmd E. So for the next keyboard shortcut is going to be Cmd G for group layers, but what I'm going to do is, for the sake of argument, I'm going to duplicate this a few times. So let's hypothetically say these are separate layers with separate items. If you click the first one, hold Shift and click the last one and hit Cmd G, it will group them all together, and you'll know it's a group because it gives you this little folder icon here. I would suggest you also rename your groups. So I'm going to double click and that will allow me to change the name, and I'm going to change it to Union Station Denver. And there you go. Let's say I'm using my transform tool and I make a change that I don't really like. I can always just hit escape. It will cancel whatever transform option I just did. And let's say I transform it in a way and I want to confirm it, I can just hit enter. And as always, Cmd Z is the undo, which is pretty obvious, but I think it's worth mentioning. Let's say I have this image here and I would like to add a hue and saturation. I can always do that by going to adjustments, but using the keyboard shortcut of Cmd U will just bring up my hue and saturation. So I can change this image really quickly that way. So as you may guess, with most softwares, it is Cmd S to save. I can save this to my cloud documents, or I can save it to my computer. So I'm just going to title this one Union Station. And let's hypothetically say I'd like to save this document as something different. So I can also go Shift Cmd S for save as, and you will be basically saving it as a new document. The next is going to be L for lasso tool, and there are several different types of lasso tools. You have the polygon one, where you connect points to create a polygon shape, then you can close it off. Or there is the normal lasso tool, where I can actually just draw a selection right on here. And if you ever select something and you're like, oh, that's not exactly right, and you're wondering how to get rid of these marching ants, you can just hit Cmd D to deselect. Let's hypothetically say I'm using my brush tool, but I find it hard to get these strokes the way I want them. So I find it sometimes it's easier to hit R, and you can actually rotate your image and go back to brush tool by using B on the keyboard, and you can get your brush strokes in that way as well. And if you'd like to go back to it, you can also hit R and hold this down, and if you hold Shift, it will rotate the image by 15 degrees. So it's much easier to get back to that 0. And if you want to make sure you get back to that 0, you can always come in here and type a specific degree like 15 or even 0. So as I mentioned before, you can use B for the brush tool. And if you'd like to change your brush settings, you can just right click and you can use all sorts of different types of brushes here. You can download a lot of brushes from the Adobe website. I will put the link in the description below. Now let's hypothetically say that you would like to erase just part of this line without, if you hit Cmd Z and you want to redo it, you have to redo the whole thing. But if you want to just erase part of it, you can just hit E for the eraser tool and erase just part of it. Now let's hypothetically say I want to make my eraser bigger or smaller, or even my brush bigger or smaller. I can come up here and change the size this way. But I think the easier way to do it would be to use the left and right bracket tool on your keyboard. The left bracket tool makes it smaller and the right one makes it bigger. So if you want to make a really big brush size, or you want to erase a much larger area, you can create a bigger brush or eraser that way. So if at any point you're using a specific tool and you don't know how to get back to the select tool, you can always hit V to bring up the arrow, and this is also your move tool. So if you wanted to move something around, but usually I go back to V as my home base tool. One of my all-time favorites is the Command plus or the Command minus to zoom in. And this is really great because it's much easier than going all the way up to view and zooming in or out that way. It's much easier just to hit Command plus or Command minus on my keyboard. And if I'm zoomed in and I want to move around, I don't really want to go over here and use this to move up and down. I can always just hold Spacebar and it will bring up my hand tool. It'll be much easier to navigate around your artboard by using that. You can also hit H for the hand tool. I like using the Spacebar because I can just hold it down and let go, and it will go back to whatever tool I was using before then. And going along with that, you can also just hit Z on your keyboard to bring up the magnifying glass to zoom in, or you can hold Alt to zoom out. However, I think that using the Command plus and the Command minus is much quicker than using the zoom tool. Another great tool is the crop tool. This one is pretty easy. It's C on the keyboard and it will bring up these lines here on the corners, the top and the sides. And let's say I just want this picture to be just my cat's head. I can pull this side in and I can pull this side in. And as soon as I hit enter, it will crop the image to where those lines were. So another one of my favorites is the wand tool, which is just W for wand on the keyboard. So let's hypothetically say that I would like to select the sky here. I can just kind of drag this and it will automatically start selecting things similar to what I'm selecting here. So let's say it selects an area that I don't want it to, like this flag for instance. I can hold the Alt key and you'll notice it turns into a minus, and that will get rid of whatever I have selected by holding Alt and dragging it over. Or if I want to reselect an area, I can just use the tool to kind of push the selection over. And as I mentioned before, if you just want to start over with your selection, you can just hit Cmd D to deselect anything. Personally, I like to do all of my text in After Effects for my videos, but let's say you wanted to add some text in here, you can just hit T on your keyboard to bring up the type tool. And once you have that, you can drag out a text box and you can just type in whatever you want. So this is Denver. And if I go up to window and character, it will bring up all of my text options. Whether I want to align it, it has the paragraph tab here. If I want to make it, bold or something like that, I do have the option to do so. And you can just hit enter and you can always go back to your move tool and make it bigger or smaller. So let's say I see a specific color in an image that I would like to use. I can always hit the I for the eyedropper tool, and you notice this little eyedropper pops up. So if I want to select the color of this tie in my animated character, I can do so. And as soon as I click, you'll notice that it shows me that color and it comes up here. So this is a very easy way to select specific colors. And then if you go over here to swatches, it will show you all the colors that you've recently selected. Let's say I just want to fill a specific layer with one color. I can bring up G for the paint bucket tool, and whatever color I select over here is the color that the paint bucket will put on that layer right there. So like I mentioned before, you can use the eyedropper tool. So if there's a specific color that you want, you can click here and I can go back here and use G and it will fill it with that color. So G for paint bucket tool. And before we finish up today's video, as always, feel free to hit the subscribe button and comment down below what you'd like to see in future videos. Also, check out my gear list in the description. And last but not least is rulers. By using Command R, you can bring up your rulers here. And if I just come up here and drag a line down, if I want to, for whatever reason I think that this is slightly off, I can bring the ruler here and I can select my image. And with the move tool selected, I can zoom in. With the move tool selected, let's say I think it's slightly off, I can always rotate it ever so slightly so it lines up with that ruler. Thank you so much everyone for joining me for another video. As always, feel free to comment down below what you'd like to see in future videos. Take it easy.